Bills Mafia, what is going on? Welcome back. Billsology is back, your Saturday night destination for all Bills content. I'm joined by Akeem Richins. I'm Dave Myers, co-founders of Built in Buffalo. We have a packed show for you, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Bills Mafia, what's going on? Don't adjust your set. That's right. Billsology is back. The show that Built in Buffalo started our YouTube channel with 4 years ago is back. We're back full time. We've done a couple pop-up shows here and there, but for the first time in 2.5 years, on a weekly basis, me and Akeem Richins will be back here live every Saturday night, 9 o'clock. I'm Dave Myers. You can follow me on Twitter/X or whatever it's called now at Dave Myers BIB. Akeem Richins, how you feeling, brother?
Hey, Akeem Richins. If you don't know us by now, ladies and gentlemen, please get to know us or re-get to know us. We are Billsology, only on the Built in Buffalo Network. Dave, it's felt like years since we've done this. Now, I know it's been a couple of months. Damar Hamlin is the last time we've been on, but it feels like so much longer. And I'm just excited to be on with you, be on with my brother, and getting back to do what we love to do and what we was born to do. And that's get on here and create content and talk Buffalo Bills football.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind, man. I mean, I remember us back, I want to say almost 4 years ago, we had Colt Schroeder on here for a little bit, and we did our thing. And that was what kind of streamlined the success of Built in Buffalo. We started small, and now we're going to have shows during the season on every single night. So I can't wait to see what the rest of the team has put forward. But tonight is about us. Tonight's about Billsology. First 3 days of camp were packed with a lot of information. A lot of stuff came out. Shout out to our team because I think we covered it really well. We had all the press conferences covered. Lance, shout out our president, Lance Nelson. He was out at camp with T, with Shoop, with Sauce God. They were getting us updates like as they were happening. So a lot of stuff, like I said, is going on. I see a lot of usual people that are back. They were with us when we were here a couple years ago, and they're back. I see Let's Talk 716 Sports, Kim Boomhauer, John Robert. So let's get into it. The week started off kind of weird with the Nahim Heinz injury. It was kind of I say weird because I feel like there was a collective agreement in Bills Mafia, like, oh, here we go again. The injuries are already happening. This is something that plagued our season last year. Like, it just seemed like it was week after week after week. Somebody new was hitting the injury report. So this is kind of a freak accident, right? He got ran into by a jet ski. He was just sitting parked on his, and he got ran into. So this kind of opens up some different questions I have about Nahim Heinz' injury and the position on the team, because I was looking at his contract, and he's owed $5.5 million next year. If the Bills release him, it's only a $500 dead cap hit. So first and foremost, Akeem, do you think this is the end of the time for Nahim Heinz, as unfortunate as it is with the Bills?
And before I even answer that, if you're watching on Facebook, please give this a like, give this a share. If you're watching on Twitter, give this a like, give this a retweet. Last but not least, if you're watching on YouTube, give this a like, say what's up. Super chats indeed get priority. I know we prioritized the comments a lot in the past. This year we're going to focus more on the content. If we get super chats, or we get creative comments in the comment section, we'll definitely put it up. But as far as Nahim Heinz, we're talking about a guy that was traded from the Indianapolis Colts last year. He was, in my opinion, the most explosive Buffalo Bills player we had. I'm not saying we used him a ton, but he added an element to the Buffalo Bills offense that can be used in advantageous situations. And I know Kelly Skipper was talking about Nahim Heinz earlier in the year, saying he now gets a training camp, a summer, a preseason to be with the Buffalo Bills and learn that playbook and possibly get an extended role, an expanded role in the offense. And now with this freak injury, we don't know what might have happened with Nahim Heinz. And to answer your question, yes, I do believe this is the end of Nahim Heinz. We heard some rift already between him and his agent and the Buffalo Bills front office about the money and about the financial situation. Nahim Heinz' agent even came out and said, hopefully, everybody will have a heart. Paraphrasing here, and do the right thing. Is about doing the right thing. So when you make comments like that, I already see some friction when I read between the lines. So to answer your question, with the Buffalo Bills having not having the flexibility in terms of finances, in terms of cap flexibility in the near future, I do think we have seen the end of Nahim Heinz, and it's a shame it had to go out like this, but I do think it's the end.
I wanted to talk about this because obviously we weren't on when it happened. It happened at the beginning of the week, so obviously we're gonna go over just spoiler alert. We're gonna go over a lot of stuff that you might have seen discussed on other channels, on other avenues of social media. But we only do this on Saturday, and it's our first show back, and we want to talk about this stuff. So, to me, only seeing that $500,000 dead cap hit, if someone comes in, and this is where I wanted to go with this conversation. If somebody comes in and can do what he did, now I'm not saying they're going to score 2 touchdowns against the New England Patriots on kick returns, but if someone can come in and be serviceable and give the Bills consistent good field position, I think this makes him extremely expendable. I thought that in the offseason that he might have been expendable anyways, because of, they signed Damian Harris. They brought in Latavius Murray. What was his role going to be other than the special teams return guy? So with that being said, let's talk about potential replacements in the return game. I got a couple names, and you let me know what you think. And if it's something, maybe I'm missing somebody. I think the 3 suspects right now are Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, and then Andy Isabella's fast. So he doesn't have tons of experience doing returns, but he's got 4.35 speed. So are any of those guys you think somebody that can come in and give you the field position that Nahim Heinz gave us last season?
Well, when we're looking at the 3 that you just named, Deontay Hardy, Andy Isabella, and Khalil Shakir, in my opinion, I believe Deontay Hardy is the front runner to win both punt return and kick return jobs. We're talking about a young man that has 77 career punt returns, 75 career kick returns in the NFL, and he was an All-Pro in 2019. And we see Deontay Hardy, he developed his game and was able to carve out a more offensive role with the New Orleans Saints, showing explosiveness on his offensive skill set. But in terms of kick return, punt return, he has the experience, he has the accolades, being an all-pro guy. So I think he's the guy that is definitely in running to take that spot that Nahim Heinz unfortunately gave up due to injury.
It's going to be interesting. And, I know this week it was seen through multiple sources that Hardy and Shakir were the guys that were doing most of the return duties. So moving on. All right. So there was a lot of speculation about Von Miller. There was a lot of speculation about Jordan Phillips and if he was going to pass his physical when he signed with the Bills. Well, he did. And now he's on the PUP list. Von Miller's on the PUP list, and Tyler Medikevich is on the PUP list, which that's a crucial loss. I mean, I don't think it's getting talked about enough. The Bills saw enough value in him to bring him back in that special teams role. But let's talk about Von Miller for a minute. I know our guy Lance has been pounding the table that he's going to play week 1. How much time do you think he's actually going to miss? Is he going to miss a couple games? Is it going to be week 6, week 8? I've seen a lot of different reports out there. What do you think the timetable is to get Von back on the field?
Well, me personally, I like to break things down, right? What are the Buffalo Bills? Who are the Buffalo Bills? This is a team that is the top of the mountain of the AFC East. We're trying to climb the pedestal of being a Super Bowl champion. And to be a Super Bowl champion, to be in those spots, to get in those positions, you have to have your best players available for those crunch time games, them big time moments. You want your best players to be available. So in my opinion, when I look at Von Miller, being that he's 34 years old, being that he played almost 8,000 snaps in the NFL, mentally, do I think Von Miller can come out week 1 and possibly play? Yes, I do. I don't think this is a Tre'Davious White situation where he's mentally, I wouldn't say fragile, but he's mentally not there where he's supposed to be, and having that trust for his knee. He's been there before where he's had an ACL injury 10 years ago, so he understands what it takes to rehab. So mentally, I don't think that'll be a problem. But physically, being that he's 34, being that we need him to be healthy late, in my opinion, there's no need to rush him back. The Buffalo Bills have a talented defensive line. They have ascending players on that defensive line, and Ed Oliver and Gregory Rousseau. So in my opinion, I would wait till about week 6. I'll put him on the pup list. I'll put him on injured reserve for the first 4 games. That 21-day window will open up. I'll let him sit out a couple more games, and I will have him ready for about week 6, week 7.
I think it's going to come down to what do these other defensive ends look like in camp and preseason, because, you know, the Bills seem to be all of a sudden loaded with guys for this rotation. And I think there's going to be somebody who's going to be an odd man out, whether it's Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson. But then, you know, we brought in Leonard Floyd, and you got to think about the combination of Leonard Floyd and Von Miller and what they were able to do in the Super Bowl against the Bengals a couple years ago. And then you also have Groot. So I think it's going to come down to how these guys look. And I don't think Sean McDermott's the type of coach. In fact, I know Sean McDermott's not the type of coach that likes to rush the process. And if, you know, Vaughn can get out in front of a camera and speak with the best of them. And he can always kind of rah and, you know, pump up the crowd. But I think that at the end of the day, I don't think it would be wise to put him out there, you know, week 1. Like you said, I think you let him sit out the first few games. Yes, it's week 1 and it's a division opponent against the New York Jets. And yes, we want all hands on deck. But if it's going to potentially cause some issues down the road, we want Von Miller in December and in January and then hopefully in February, late into February, right? That's when we want Von Miller at his best. So as long as he comes back and he's ready to go 100% whenever that is, I'm okay with him not starting the season on the active roster. All right, so we're gonna keep it moving. Don't forget to smash that like. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We're trying to grow this following. We get to engage with more and more fans each and every week. If you're watching on Twitter, drop some comments, retweet this. Facebook, smash the like, drop some comments. Next guy. So the Bills signed a tight end. Jay Sternberger. And I think it was very interesting. And I'll give a couple nuggets of why I think it's very interesting. So he was drafted in 2019 by the Green Bay Packers. He was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2019 draft. You know who else was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2019 draft? Dawson Knox. So you got to think that he may have been on the Bills' radar when the Bills were going to pick in the 3rd round. We don't know if he was on that board that Bean has or not, but I like that there's probably some scouting familiarity with him. There's probably conversations about the type of tight end he is, blocking wise, scheme wise. But the question I have, what? Oh, that's our guy Lance. Lance is producing our show, by the way. He's going to be producing our show all season. So, the question I have, and this is kind of going to make you think a little bit. Does this spell the end for A, Quentin Morris, and B, Reggie Gilliam? Reggie Gilliam has been seeing a lot of snaps in training camp at tight end. We all know that he's kind of a hybrid. They've kind of gone away from using him as a full end, more so just a blocker every once in a while to a tight end. Does this spell the end for those two guys? What do you think?
You know, I think it's going to be interesting. Brandon Beane always says, I'm always looking for ways to improve the team. And Jay Steinberger, he very well could have been on the Buffalo Bills radar at that in that draft, in the 2019 draft. Dawson Knox was drafted 96 overall. Jace was drafted 75th overall,
Right.
20 slots before Dawson Knox. So you never know what could have happened with that situation. But in terms of who he could upseat in terms of a roster spot, it could be tricky. In my opinion, I think Reggie Gilliam is a guy that the Buffalo Bills really like. I think they like his versatility on offense as a fullback, as a tight end, and I think they like what he does and what he represents on special teams. So I think Reggie Gilliam is safe. If Jace is going to unseat anybody, it's going to be Quentin Morris in that third tight end spot. They're always looking for competition in all slots, first, second, third team. And I think Jace is going to be one of those guys that's going to push a Quentin Morris. His scouting report coming out of college, he was a talented route runner. He runs routes like a wide receiver. He has above average hands. So we all should know that Brandon Beane is going to find, or going to try to find, Josh Allen weapons, and even if those weapons are diamonds in the rough. So we're going to see what Jace is capable of in training camp, and if he can indeed unseat any of those guys for a roster spot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many tight ends they keep on the active 53. And we have to remember, too, that these guys, Quentin Morris and Jay Sternberger, they're not necessarily competing against each other. They're competing against an extra defensive lineman, an extra offensive lineman, an extra linebacker. Excuse me. They're competing for a 53-man spot, right? Ultimately, they're competing just to make the roster. So that's where, to your point, where Reggie Gilliam brings extra value because he plays special teams, because he's been on the team, because the Bills have invested in him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I'll tell you, it's not a bad problem to have, because I think we know who tight end 1 and 2 are, or 1A and 1B, because, we'll talk about Dalton Kincaid here in a little bit, but after those two, it's not a bad problem to have a guy who's been in the system, to have a guy like Quentin Morris, who I think showed some signs last year, had a big catch against the Dolphins. And then Sternberger, who, could be something. But again, he was out of the league, was playing in the USFL this past offseason. So it's going to be really interesting to see. All right. I want to spend some time on this one, because you and I haven't had a chance to discuss this topic that's been going on since February. Where I'm going to talk about Stefon Diggs. I was ecstatic when I found out what time his press conference was going to be, and I watched every damn minute of it, and I enjoyed every single thing that he said. I thought he was professional. I thought that he made me think back to the Stefon Diggs of last year, 2021, 2020. Very charismatic guy, speaks his mind, very professional still shows some semblance of being humble. But he kept saying repeatedly, it's water under the bridge, because you could tell the Bills media was poking him. They were trying to poke him to get him to react to whatever they thought he was going to react to. So first impressions of the Diggs press conference. What's your first initial takeaways of his presser?
I think he came in and actually did a phenomenal job. Nobody heard from Diggs in terms of a press conference, in terms of answering media questions this whole offseason. Everybody was wondering what he had to say, and I think he took everything on the chin. He answered everything he was supposed to answer in the way he was supposed to answer it. Very professional, very thorough with his responses, and I think that's what we wanted to see as fans. We wanted to see the transparency coming from Stefon Diggs and his personality. We wanted to see what he said. We wanted to see how he responded to certain answers in certain situations, because you are right, they was indeed poking him. So we all wanted to know how he would react. And in my opinion, it's all about winning with Stefon Diggs. We know that the wide receiver position is, quote unquote, this diva position, right? So it's been plenty of guys where they don't get the ball, or they're unhappy usually it comes from the wide receiver position. So Stefon Diggs does have that trait in him, being that he comes from that wide receiver pack. But at the end of the day, Stefon Diggs, fifth most yards last year in the NFL, over 1,400. Seventh most targets in the NFL last year with over 9.5. One of three players with over 140 targets the last 3 seasons. So it's not getting the ball. It's not throwing his direction. Stefon Diggs just wants to win. And when he feels his team is good enough to win and they're not winning, the frustrations are going to set in. And I don't think that's being a diva. I think that's being a human and having that competitive spirit. I think he did a great job in the presser.
Yeah, and I think he was 100% transparent. Like, he talked about Sean McDermott. He talked about the fact that he showed up to camp and minicamp. He showed up to minicamp and he had a conversation with McDermott. He even said that coach since then has told him that he misspoke when he told him about, when he came out and said that he was concerned, very concerned. And we know the relationship between Diggs and McDermott. We've seen it on display several times in big moments. We saw it after the Chiefs AFC Championship game. He went out and got him. And when he was standing on the field watching, the Chiefs celebrate, there was times last year, I believe it was the Lions game, when Diggs walked up to him, put his head on his shoulders, and you could tell that McDermott said something to him that got him, back in the right headspace. And I think, he made it a point to say this is not like the Minnesota situation was. He didn't say what was going on in Minnesota. He said he didn't want to give specifics. He didn't want to, talk about it, but he said, this is not that. He's like, I don't want to call plays. He's like, I have no idea how to even call plays. He's like, I don't want to be that involved in the offense. He's like, I just want everybody to know that when it's crunch time, I want my number to be called, and I will compete until I'm not playing anymore. And he made another point to say, I have a lot more football behind me than I have in front of me. So he knows that he's getting to a point in his career where he wants a championship, because the window might be closing pretty quick for him, not for the team, but for him. Mm-hmm. So I think it was refreshing to see him sit there smiling. He even got into it with one of the Bills media members. I think it was John Walra. He's like, dude, are you going to ask me a question? Like, just ask the question. Like, he was ready for whatever they were going to bring to him. And you could tell he's been pumping himself up for this moment since February. And like you said, if you're not competing, and Brandon Beane said this in his press conference, he's like, I was not concerned about Stefon Diggs at all. And I want guys like that on my team, that they want to compete so bad and win so bad that they get frustrated because they're not playing up to the standards that they think this team is capable of. And I think that we as fans just kind of see a player getting upset and throwing up his hands or arguing with another player, and we think that they're a problem. No, that couldn't be any further from the case. They're just expressing the fact that they know how good this team is when they are on, and they can compete with anybody in this league. And I think it was nice for him to finally get that stuff out of the way. He seemed like he was in good spirits the rest of camp. It looks like he's smiling. He's engaging with the fans again. So I do, however, want to point out the fact that he made it a point to talk about Gabe Davis. And I don't think that they have this huge public relationship. They are wide receiver 1 and 2. They've been together for 3 years now. So he made it a point to say that if I'm not here, he's wide receiver 1. And he was injured all season. And he's going to have a monster season, in which Gabe Davis the next day in his press conference said, that's the worst injury I've had playing football. And I want everybody to know my ankle's 100% and I'm ready to go. What do you take away from Diggs? I don't want to say he's promoting, Gabe Davis, but what do you take away about that? I mean, can we ever think of living in a world where Gabe Davis would be wide receiver 1 on this team? I mean, thankfully we don't have to, but what do you think about his comments kind of promoting his guy?
That's exactly what you should do and what you have to do as a leader, right? Stefon Diggs is the second best player, arguably, on the Buffalo Bills. And for him to publicly glow about Gabriel Davis, first of all, it tells a lot about his leadership. Second of all, it does a lot for Gabe Davis, the player. He knows that Stefon Diggs is the alpha, but the alpha believes in me. Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, the best players believe in me. So I have the utmost confidence and the utmost duty to come through because of the belief the best players have in me. So I believe that it is a great opportunity for Gabe Davis to come out in a contract year, show that he's finally healthy, show he can run all the routes in the route tree, show that he can stay healthy, and show everybody what he's capable of doing with a full season with that injury, with that ankle injury, finally at 100%. So for Stefon Diggs to co-sign for him, I think it's a uplift for the offense and an uplift for the individual player in Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, and I was intrigued by Gabe Davis's press conference too, because he made it a point to say, look, I know where my average depth of target is. It's further than anybody else in the NFL. It's been that way. It was like that when I was in college. It's been like that since I've been here. He's like, I want to do all the other stuff. This is just what's dialed up for me, and this is what I do. And he's like, a lot of people don't understand how much more difficult it is to be successful when you're consistently catching passes that are so much harder to actually complete than the short stuff. You know, the screen passes and the crossing routes and the little slants and stuff like that. He's like, it's extremely difficult to catch a pass 30 yards downfield because it's going to be contested every time. So I think him acknowledging the fact that he wants to be more involved and he should be more involved, I think was really nice to hear. So we'll kind of
He hears
segue
the
in.
noise. He hears the noise. He understands
Absolutely.
hit the criticism he faces. He heard the noise, the expectations coming off a breakout, a hopeful breakout year following an over 200-yard receiving performance and 4 touchdowns against Kansas City, and not necessarily living up to expectations. Not a bad season, but probably didn't have the season fans expected him to have. And Gabe Davis definitely knows all that, and I'm sure he took time this offseason to continue to develop the routes in his route tree and show what he's capable of finally at 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I hate playing the woulda, coulda, shoulda game, but a couple more big receptions, he's over 1,000 yards. How many wide receiver twos are we comparing him to then that went over 1,000, 7, 8 touchdowns? He's consistently been that. I think he gets a bad rap for having some drops in key moments, but I mean, the guy is producing at a wide receiver 2 level. You put him on any other team as wide receiver 2, and he's producing. You know, he's one of the best wide receiver 2s, I think, in the NFL. And for Diggs to say that, for Stefon Diggs to come out and say that and support his guy, just kind of shows the character that Stefon Diggs is. And he said, even in his presser, look, I'm a captain. I've been a captain for a couple years now. There's a reason why I'm a captain. You guys don't see what I do in the locker room. You guys don't see what happens after practice. That's the stuff that my teammates know about me. And that's the stuff I feel comfortable with at the end of the day. So, all right, we'll kind of segue into the next topic. I want to talk about Ken Dorsey for a little bit, because I think a lot of Bills fans were kind of hard on him after the loss to the Bengals. I think it was hit or miss throughout the season. It seemed like early on, of course, the Bills were winning and having really good success on offense, so it was okay for us to kind of like not dig in too much into detail on what he was calling on a week-to-week basis. But then Josh got injured. It seemed like he was forcing play calls. It seemed like there was times when he was abandoning the run. They didn't utilize the screen game. So multiple reports and stuff that I've seen, I know stuff that you've seen and read online, is that Dorsey seems to have wide opened the playbook. Like, it's wide open, and he's expressing his skill level at being an offensive coordinator. And it's on display in practice. We're talking about, running 12 personnel more in camp. We're talking about practicing screen passes. We're talking about pre-snap motion. We're talking about guys lining up all over the place on the offense. So what's your take on what we've seen so far? Now, it's only 3 days. I get that. And he's probably trying to unload the playbook to try to see which guys and which pieces work here and there and what plays work here and there. But what's your take so far on the first 3 days of what we've seen and heard out of Ken Dorsey at Bills with the offense?
More creativity in practice, right? Having creativity is something that I think Buffalo Bills fans, even though Buffalo Bills fans, they're no experts, but there's a poll out there, and we are the most intelligent fans in football. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw
that Twitter post, but Ken Dorsey's creativity. We want to be more creative. We want to be more multiple. He's been running a lot of 12 personnel. He's been putting Stefon Diggs in motion, pre-snap motions. And this is good throughout the first 3 days of camp, because in my opinion, I think Ken Dorsey last year did a phenomenal job. But I think at times he was too dependent on the skill talent and the skill levels of his players. And he was expecting his players to constantly make plays, which they should and they could. They're NFL players, but at the same time, it was a lot of instances, short down distances, 3rd and 4, 4th and 1s, when we're like, okay, can Dorsey scheme us to a first down? And I don't think we seen the offensive coordinator scheme a play, scheme a guy for a first down, scheme a guy open. So we want to see Stefon Diggs in motion. We want to see more 12 personnel. We want to see our offensive skill players, our best offensive skill players, put in advantageous situations, right? So they can take advantage of the opposition. And so far through the first 3 days, we've been seeing that. And we've been seeing a lot of Stefon Diggs in the slot. We don't know who's going to play slot. Could it be Shakir? Could it be Sherfield? It could be a slot by committee, right? We could see Gabe Davis play in the slot more. We could see Stefon Diggs play in the slot more. So that is something that I want to continue to see from Ken Dorsey. I want to see him continue to be multiple. So, because let me give some numbers right quick. We played the New York Jets on 9/11 primetime football to start the season in New York. Do you know how crazy that game is going to be? It's going to be a crazy game. In 2 games last year, I just want to run off some numbers. 2 games last year versus the Jets. Gabriel Davis in 2 games versus the Jets, 5 receptions, 64 yards. Stefon Diggs in 2 games versus the Jets last year, 10 receptions, 130 yards. Josh Allen in 2 games versus the Jets last year, 34 for 61, 352 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 2 interceptions. So what that tells me is the New York Jets secondary have a very good one, right? So what do we want to do early on? We want to be able to put Stefon Diggs in motion, line him up against the linebacker, line him up against the safety, put Gabriel Davis up against the linebacker. We want to be multiple, put these guys in motion, pre-snap motions, to put them in advantageous situations and get them in good down and field distances to make plays. And I think that's what Ken Dorsey's showing thus far.
I think he had a press conference too, and I think he even admitted that there's room to grow. You know, we had a ton of red zone issues last year. We had some, like you said, short, 3rd or 4th and short distance to go, and it looked like we had no idea what the hell we were doing. The end of the Miami game, you saw his frustration when he was throwing things around and up in the booth, because they couldn't get lined up to spike the ball, because the play call, the previous play, was not run correctly. It's all about execution. And that's what he said. He said, we need to execute better. It's not that we didn't have the personnel last year. It's just that we did not execute. And he even said it starts with him. He even said that there's things that he learned about himself. For instance, we as Bills fans have been clamoring for a screen game it seems like since Josh has been here. Like the easiest completion. Now, granted, we know Josh doesn't like to take the easy passes, but a screen pass, right now, there's no reason why, with the backs that we have with James Cook and Damian Harrison and Latavius Murray makes the roster, these guys can house it from anywhere on the field. We don't have Devin Singletary, love him or hate him, who was limited in what he could do after he got the ball in his hands, after his touches. So it's going to be interesting to see. And like you said, if you line up Diggs in the slot, or you're throwing screen passes to Diggs, or a quick slant, it's unstoppable. It is unguardable. I'm sorry. The times that we did it last year, it was very few and far between, but the times that the Bills ran it last year, it was unstoppable. If you needed a quick 7, you throw a slant to Diggs, he gets 10 yards, it's a first down. And then we were all like, where the hell has this been all season? So I agree with you.
And yak yardage. Go ahead, Dave.
So it seemed like he brought that up in his presser too. I'm glad you said that, because from the personnel that the Bills have added, and Ken Dorsey saying, look, we're looking for yak or rack, run after catch, right? They brought in Hardy, who's a speedster. They brought in Andy Isabella, who's a speedster. Trent Sherfield has really good yards after catch. Gabe Davis in his presser was talking about, I need to be, able to run the entire route tree so that I can make plays after I catch the ball. A lot of my downfield pass attempts, it's contested. So either I'm catching it and getting tackled right away, or it's in the red zone. So I think that adding a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who has elite hands, that's going to help. We didn't even mention him yet, but adding a guy like him, I think that there's a lot of ways that the Bills can be creative. It's all going to depend on if Ken Dorsey has the mind that we need him to have with these pieces. Because I think this is the best receiving core that Josh Allen has had since he's been here. You can say, well, he had John Brown, Stefon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Cole Beasley. Yeah, but if you look at what they have in front of them right now, if they utilize them correctly, how many jet sweeps can they run with Deontay Hardy or Andy Isabella or any of these guys that are speedsters? Like it's endless amounts of play calling that can be had. So we just have to hope that he has a sense of urgency every single game. And like you said, we need to come out week 1 and smash the Jets in the mouth with, you guys can't prepare for what we have. We have so many different weapons. We're going to line up all over the place. And that's what they were doing in practice. And that's why I started the conversation by saying he's been lining up Dawson Knox in the backfield. He's been doing 5 wide. He's been doing the 12 personnel. So it's going to be interesting.
Take some pressure off the offense. Take some pressure off of Josh Allen.
Yeah.
How can you open up the Jets and open up that defense? You have to get them moving. You have to do different things. You're going to have to run that 12 personnel. You're going to have to go in motion. You're going to have to do things to get players, the opposition, out their spots so we can get a step and make plays. And if Ken Dorsey can do that and utilize the players correctly, like you said, because we have the skill sets. We have Deontay Hardy who could take a screen to the house. We have James Cook that can do the same thing. We have Stefon Diggs and Gabriel Davis that can play the X, Y, and the Z. So we have multiple guys that can do multiple things. So it's time for us to take advantage of that. So Ken Dorsey in his second year, because again, we want to win a Super Bowl. Again, we're looked at as one of the better teams in the NFL and favorited to win the Super Bowl. But our offensive coordinator is only going into his second season. So what do we want to see most from a guy going into his second season? Just like what I want to see from a rookie going into his second season, progression. I want to see progression from Ken Dorsey. You should be progressed because of your second season. We shouldn't see some of the same flaws, some of the same mistakes from the offensive coordinator. If we take that onus to players, right? We expect players to progress in year 1 and year 2. Spencer Brown, we expect to take that step in year 3 because he's in year 3. We should expect that same level of progression from our coaches and especially our young coaches. So progression is the name of the game for Ken Dorsey in year 2. And I think he's off to a good start.
I agree 100%. All right, before we get into Akeem's favorite segment of the show, don't forget to smash that like. If you guys throw some comments in there, let's keep the comments coming through on Facebook, YouTube. This is our first show, so we weren't expecting a huge audience, but everybody that's here, we appreciate you coming and checking our show out. And like I said, we'll be back every Saturday, 9 o'clock, right here on the Built in Buffalo Network. All right, so it's time. Are you ready, Akeem?
Let's do it, bro.
I guess it's still called Tweet This, even though are they still tweets?
I think so. I think so. X this. I don't know. We'll change when we see fit.
X going to give it to you? That's the only X I know. I mean, All right, so up first, Chris Trapasso. As we all know, he works for CBS. This has been a theme every single day by just members of media, whether it be Bills media, whether it be brands like us, whether it be other outlets. Dalton Kincaid has impressed. We're gonna get into him a little bit more towards the end of the show, but what else could you ask for from a first round pick? He seems like he's a humble guy. If you guys watch Embedded, the Bills put out Embedded. He's golfing with Dawson Knox. They have an absolute great relationship already. He seems like a smart guy. His hands are something, because I put in our group chat a few days ago. Could you imagine coming into the NFL and the quarterback you have to catch passes from is Josh Allen? Stuff's coming out like a rocket. And I haven't seen any drop passes. I'm not saying maybe they just aren't showing them, but it seems like he's catching everything thrown his way. So what's your immediate reaction to Dalton Kincaid as advertised?
So far, so good, as advertised. Now, I'm reading a lot of comparisons to Travis Kelce. That is a lofty comparison. I did blush and giggle when I saw that, and because he's on our team.
Yeah.
But again, that's a lofty comparison, and I don't want to go there yet. But so far, to see him be so fluid for his size, to see him get in and out of his breaks, to see those strong hands where he plucks it out, plucks the football out the air. To see all these things is definitely a good sign. And I know a lot of us fans talk about the Buffalo Bills. Why don't we play certain rookies? Why don't certain rookies get the amount of snaps and amount of time that we think as fans they should be getting? But I don't think we're going to have that issue with Dalton Kincaid. This is reminiscent to me of Tre'Davious White being drafted and Deion Dawkins being drafted several years ago, when they got drafted as rookies and they got thrown into the fire immediately. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen to Dawson Knox. I think he's already an integral part of the Bills offense early on. And so far, he is as advertised. I love what I'm seeing thus far. And hopefully he can continue to improve and impress and give us this dimension that we haven't seen, that we want to see. The Buffalo Bills was trying to do it last year. I believe that's why they signed a guy by the name of Jacob Hollister. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. That didn't come to fruition. But now we have the guy that we think we can propel this 12 personnel and get more multiple on offense. So I like what I'm seeing from the first round pick thus far.
I mean, it's running the 12 personnel is kind of reminiscent of what Brian Daboll did, because we all know Daboll was about where can I find a mismatch? And when you're lining up 12 personnel and you got Dawson Knox who can make plays, and you have a Dalton Kincaid who's got elite hands, the defense is going to be put in a situation where we pick your poison. Are we going to focus on Dalton Kincaid possibly just rolling out in the flat and just, taking one for 40 yards, or are we going to focus on Knox? What's he doing? And then you got to focus on the receivers and what they're doing. So I think it's nice to see that he wasn't. I feel like he wasn't overhyped, and people got to remember that, yes, he is a tight end, but let's not focus on the tight end aspect of his position, which is blocking and stuff like that. Like, the guy has elite hands. He is a pass catcher. Per Brandon Bean, he is a pass catcher first. So, all right, second up here on Tweet This. We kind of alluded to this earlier, but it was nice to see that the Bills did sign Andy Isabella. Fun fact, and it didn't get much push out there in social media, but N'Keal Harry actually did come in for a tryout, and the Bills chose Andy Isabella. So what's your thoughts on Andy Isabella? He's a speedster, but he was a street free agent. Obviously, he wasn't picked up by anybody in the past few months. So what's your thoughts?
Bring a guy in that's a former second round pick. I believe he was 61st overall. I could be wrong. Give a guy that was that high of a draft selection a chance. He has the explosiveness. I believe he ran a 4.3 coming out of in the combine, coming out of college. And we do have some competition at that return game, punt return and kick return, because of the Heinz injury. So when you have those factors, I think it could be beneficial to bring a guy like Andy in, see what he has. He has 8 career kick returns in the NFL. He done some kick return in college as well. Let's see if he can come over and win a job, and see if he can help this team.
I agree 100%. I mean, there's no harm, no foul, right? I mean, it's
Right.
either going to work out or it's not. And if it works out, great. You found him at the end of July. So, all right, up next on Tweet This. So, take these rankings for what they are, the NFL top 100, because as we know, they are voted on by the players. So, Jordan Poyer at 57. How do you feel? You think that's fair? Because I think that Micah Hyde, it's being held against him that he didn't play last year. And maybe the guys were just like, yeah, I don't know how he's going to come back. I feel like they're completely interchangeable. And either one of them could have been 57, 56, 57, 58, whatever. They could have both been, they should have both been on the list. So what's your thoughts with Poyer at 57?
With talking about Micah Hyde a little bit, the NFL players, they remember what you've done lately, right? And I think that's what hurts Micah Hyde, but he's definitely a top 100 player in this NFL. For Jordan Poyer, I actually think is a pretty solid number at 57. We're talking about a guy that he faced a lot of injury. He missed time. He faced a lot of injury. He had to battle through a lot of things. I don't think he had to battle as much in the past being with the Buffalo Bills. So for him to battle through injury with that elbow, to take long flights, to go through the things that he's went through, and NFL players, his peers, acknowledge that. I think that's a testament to the type of player Jordan Poyer is, and the type of player the NFL players know Jordan Poyer to be. And now that he's healthy, along with his running mate Micah Hyde, I think this is going to be a elevated defense that was missing these guys in the secondary. I don't think Jordan Poyer was the same guy in the playoffs, even though I think he was there. I think he played, and of course players are going to say they're healthy, but I don't think he was the same player we're accustomed to seeing in Jordan Poyer. And obviously the loss of Micah Hyde. So I think we're going to get elevated and motivated group from our safety group this year. And I like 57. Not a bad number.
All right. Next up on Tweet This. How ironic is it that the Bills Mafia, I don't even know how to say this the right way, Matt Milano 69. Like, I've seen too much from the Bills Mafia fans one way or the other, but we'll cut through that. So how do you feel about Milano being 69? I have some gripe with it when I saw Poyer was 57, because I feel like Milano
should be higher,
is a lot more important to this defense than Jordan Poyer is. And I may be on an island with that thought, but a lot of people were talking this offseason about losing Tremaine Edmonds. And I was quick to say the best linebacker on the team is still on the roster. So I don't know. I think he's in the top 100. It's voted on by the peers. I know there's some stuff out there that some people think that Milano's kind of a dirty player. Personally, I think that he just follows through on his plays, and people don't like that he executes his plays. If you watch how he plays, everything's a form tackle. It's not like he's doing things deliberately to injure players. But I think 69 is good. I'm okay with it. What do you think?
I think it's too low. We're talking about an all-pro player, first-team all-pro player. We're talking about a guy, in my opinion, who was in the running. I know we have, the defensive ends in Bosa and Parsons, but Matt Milano was, in my opinion, one of the best defensive players and in the running for Defensive Player of the Year last year. So in my opinion, I think he was slighted a bit. I think he's still a bit underrated as far as talent amongst his peers, and grateful to see him make the top 100, but I'm a little disappointed to see him at 69 and not higher.
I agree 100%. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's version of Tweet This. We'll still figure out if it's going to be tweet this or X this or
This.
whatever going forward. All right. So we talked about Matt Milano. So let's talk about the linebackers for a minute.
Yep.
Because what are we doing at middle linebacker? Reports coming out that there's been just the changing of the guard at middle linebacker. I guess the Bills are doing their due diligence, trying to figure out if one of these guys is going to jump ahead of the pack and put his foot in the ground as the Bills starting middle linebacker, or maybe it could be by committee. I'm not quite sure. I've heard a lot about Balen Spector. He's looked good. Seems like he's getting more reps than Terrell Bernard and Terrell Dotson. So my question is, where's Dorian Williams at? I haven't heard anything. Maybe it's just me, but I haven't really heard a peep. From the first day, I heard a little bit about him, but the last couple of days, I haven't heard anything about Dorian Williams unless he's just they're playing him, to be Milano's backup, or they're just trying to figure out if he's going to be on special teams to start. So I know that was like a super huge open-ended question, but like what are we doing at middle linebacker, do you think? I mean, is it going to be by committee? Is it going to be we're just going to wait and see on these guys? Or what's your thoughts on all these guys I just named?
So ultimately, when I talk about the offense and this period of time, I take it with more of a grain of salt than I would the defense. Reason being is because at least these offensive players, they still have to run, they still have to get into their routes, get into their breaks, get in and out their cuts, and make the catch. So I still be impressed, even though the pad's not on. On the defensive side of the ball, I want to see them in pads. These defensive players have to get in pads, in my opinion, especially at the position of a middle linebacker position when you're in that front seven, when you're taking on blocks, when you have to shed blocks, when you have to make the tackle, when you have to get in coverage and get you down in distance. Those are so much intricacies from a middle linebacker that we have to see with the pads on. But thus far, early on, Terrell Dotson, if I'm thinking about who would get the nod thus far, I would think he is the front runner. I think Terrell Dotson is that front runner because he has some size to him. He's about 237, 240, and he has that experience. He understands the speed of the game. He understands how to be a pro in the NFL. He understands through injuries we've had in the past with Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, and he had to get thrusted into that role. So because of all those things, I would think he's the front runner to be that middle linebacker, and I think the Brandon Beane and the defensive staff will give him an opportunity to win that role. But Terrell Bernard, Balen Spector, those two guys are very intelligent, high IQ football players. And I think with those guys, it's more about leadership skills. It's more about intangibles. And those are things you want to have and you want to see coming from your middle linebacker. It's just, can they handle the physicality being in the trenches? Can they shed blocks on the run plays? Can they get back and understand play action and get back into their drops in the zones? And only the experience factor would be able to let us know that for sure. So I think those things, and those are the differences between the linebackers we have with Bernard and Spector and with Terrell Dotson. And as far as Dorian Williams, I think I'm going to listen to exactly what Brandon Beane said, and I think he's going to start playing the will linebacker. Now, if things change, God forbid injuries happen, or he flashes and show that he can handle physicality, things may change then. But right now, he is the will linebacker, and it's a wait to be seen with all our linebackers, really and truly.
Well, I can tell you this: they have to believe that one of those guys is going to be the guy because they didn't do anything draft-wise. They didn't do anything free agency. And we saw what these veteran linebackers, especially middle linebackers, contracts were going for. I mean, Bobby Wagner's contract was nothing. And I don't want to hear about salary cap because Beane always figures out a way to make it work. So unless the scheme is going to be different and they're going to depend on, a Taylor Rapp to play somewhat of a linebacker role, or they're going to depend on Terron Johnson, who plays nickel, but technically can almost be a linebacker-esque player, depending on, the defensive formations and what they want, what they're going to do. Or they are going to be relying heavily upon the defensive line to create some noise this year. I mean, we saw what the Philadelphia Eagles did last year with that massive rotation they had. I think how many sacks did they have last year? 80 something? I
They had
think
a lot. They had a lot.
86 or something like that.
Something crazy.
And maybe they're banking on the fact that we have all these guys up front. We just got Leonard Floyd. So they went and got an edge rusher late into free agency, but they didn't add any linebackers, right? They went and got Leonard Floyd, who's an outside edge rusher, but they didn't add any linebackers, not a middle linebacker, nothing. So they got to have faith that the guys they have in-house are going to be able to fit into the scheme and make it work. Because I'll tell you right now, Balen Spector's a small guy. It's going to be like having two Matt Milanos out there. Matt Milano's a hell of a player, and he's quick, but for what he has in quickness, he lacks in some, gap integrity and choosing the right angles depending on, tackles, because I believe in college his missed tackle percent was pretty high. So if that's something that can be, coached up and corrected, fine. Dorian Williams, go ahead.
I would think now, everything remains to be seen until we see it. Everything's speculation. But I would think the Buffalo Bills would have to be more multiple on defense under Sean McDermott. We're talking about a defense that had Tremaine Edmonds last season at 6'5", between 250 and 60 pounds, and never got out of the nickel defense with Terron Johnson. Now we lose a guy 6'5", 250 pounds. We're putting in a smaller guy at that middle, and we're still going to run this nickel defense with Terron Johnson. We've got gashed in a couple of instances in a couple of games last season and in past seasons. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Buffalo Bills do. Our offensive teams are going to try to take advantage of the Buffalo Bills in the trenches in the run game if they can't hold up in the front seven. So a lot of questions that will be answered in training camp and as the season rolls around.
And the easiest thing to compare it to is look at what the defense looked like without Tremaine Edmonds. The couple times he's missed games throughout his career in Buffalo, the defense looked different. Now, that could be something to key in on, that they're going to run a different scheme. Something's going to be different, and in the back seven is going to look different. They brought in, a starting caliber safety in Taylor Rapp. So are we going to use him differently? We do have Terron Johnson already in-house, who we know, the big nickel, but they didn't bring anybody in. They didn't address it in the draft. They didn't sign any free agents. They brought in an edge rusher instead. So I think it's going to be predicated on the fact of, are we going to get to the quarterback? Because I feel confident in the fact if we can get after the quarterback, I feel confident in our back four, whoever that is, whatever combination it is at CB2. I feel confident in our coverage. So that's going to lead into our next topic. I brought up CB2. So Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford have split reps. It seems there's reports every day that one performed well with the ones and one was performing well with the twos and vice versa. And they were kind of going back and forth. So I feel like, and it's been noted everywhere, and I bitched about it on Twitter for all of last season, why Kaiir Elam was not the CB2 the whole season. And that's no knock on Christian Benford, because I believe we absolutely found a stud that could potentially be a Tre'Davious White replacement one day. Yes, I said that. Because you got a guy, the first round picks are always going to be ridiculed, and they're always going to be scrutinized more because of where they're drafted, right? So if this was a guy who was drafted even in the second round, I don't think we would be critiquing him the way that we would if, like he was drafted in the first round. Same thing that's going to happen to Dalton Kincaid this year. Like, if he doesn't perform, we're going to say, well, you wasted a first round pick. But we all know how Christian Benford performed when he came in and played last year. Actually started the season as CB2 last year, opposite of Dane Jackson. So what do we make of all of this? Because Dane Jackson was getting some run with the ones too, and we all know Dane Jackson, just because he was, he was brought back on a minimum contract, he's not just going to roll over and say, okay, I'm a depth guy, I'll play special teams. So what do we make of the CB2 situation? Is it Elam's to lose? Is it Benford's to lose? What are we doing at CB2? What's your thoughts?
I think the Buffalo Bills are going to roll out Dane Jackson as CB2 because he's been there. This is what I'm thinking the Bills is thinking, and then I'm gonna say what I'm hoping for. Right now, I think that they got Dane Jackson as the guy. He's been there. He hasn't been terrible, right? He's reminiscent of a Levi Wallace. Give us that Levi Wallace vibe. So I think the Buffalo Bills do like him, and he will get some snaps. I like Christian Benford, 5th round pick coming out of Connecticut. Not a big school, but Division I. He was a ball hawk in college. I like his aggressiveness. I like his physical stature, his physical nature. But at the end of the day, he was drafted in the 5th round. And not saying he's not going to be good, because I think he's going to be good. But Kaiir Elam is a 1st round pick. Kaiir Elam has the highest ceiling out of all the cornerbacks on the roster, in my opinion, including Trey White right now in his stage of his career. Kaiir Elam has the highest ceiling. He's over 6 foot, 6'1". He has a 4.3 40. He has a 38-inch vertical. In my opinion, the Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott and that coaching staff should be putting Kaiir Elam to get some reps. Let's maximize the ceiling of our 1st round pick. That's what I would like to see, being that he's there. But again, it's early in camp, and we know Sean McDermott likes his rotations and likes for guys to earn their spots.
I agree with you. I don't know if I agree with the Dane Jackson. I remember several group chats that you and me are involved in, and we were just talking about why is Dane Jackson out there.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I digress. And like I said, and that's why I threw his name in there, because he's not just going to roll over. And we know that he's a McDermott guy. Like, McDermott likes Dane Jackson. There's a reason why he's back on the roster when you have Christian Benford and Kaiir Elam. You brought him back we brought him back for depth. No, you brought him back because he's going to compete. He's going to compete. And the cream rises to the top, right? So we'll see. It's just I feel like it's interesting because we had Kaiir Elam on our network, right? And he was talking about, we were asking him questions. Lance and Peter were asking him questions about covering Tyreek Hill and what's it like to cover Jalen Waddle and stuff like that. He's like, I can cover him. I'm fast, and we all know that he is our fastest DB. So that to me, that accounts to a lot, because I feel like the Bills are going to not specifically just run zone defense this year. I think there's going to be more man coverage this year. I really do. And who does that bode well to? Kaiir Elam.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Oh, gosh. All right, moving on. Offensive line. So we're going to touch on the offensive line, and we're going to talk about this man in particular here. So the first day of camp, we saw a mix of offensive line. It was mainly Dawkins, McGovern, Morse, Ryan Bates, and Spencer Brown. The last 2 days of camp, though, Osiris Torrence has been getting most of the reps at right guard. So the first question I have for you, because we all know how McDermott in rookies works. Everybody says he doesn't play rookies. Some people can say, well, I can defend that and show you the snap count, but special teams is a lot of that stuff. Do you feel like we have our starting right guard in Osiris Torrence for 2023, or you think it's going to be Ryan Bates? As of right now, I know it's only been 3 days, but
as of right now, I think it's still Ryan Bates. As of right now, yes, I know. Only 3 days, and again, right now, as of today, 10:04 p.m. my time, 7/29/2023. I think it's Ryan Bates, but again, preseason games have to play. Competition, iron sharpens iron. We have to see all these things come into play, and maybe Osiris Torrence as a rookie can unseat him. I do definitely think he's the future. I would love to see him get in there now and start and get accustomed to the speed and take his lumps from now. Right, kind of like what Andrew Thomas. I know he's a tackle, but Andrew Thomas of the New York Giants, he struggled mightily his first year, but he was out there. He gained that experience. He took his lumps, and he's been a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player ever since, and they rewarded him with a contract. So, in my opinion, when you have a guy in Osiris Torrence that's 6'5", 346 pounds, who's a mountain, massive, powerful of a man, you get him out there, throw him to the wolves, and let him take his lumps and let him develop on the fly.
He's a big dude, man. There was a picture of him standing next to Spencer Brown, and we know how big Spencer Brown is. He's a mountain of a man.
Ryan Bates is in a good spot because you got Mitch Morse. He could play center or guard. And Mitch Morse, he has concussion history, and who knows how much longer he's going to be with the Bills.
I just feel like the Bills have 17 linemen on the roster, and that's not by accident. Some team's going to come calling, and I feel like Ryan Bates is probably the most intriguing trade candidate. I just feel like that. Look at what the Bears were willing to offer him, and the Bills had to go and match him. Bean had to go match that contract. The Bears were willing to give him a really good salary, the same thing that the Bills matched. So I feel like in a few weeks, somebody might be calling Bean saying, "Hey, you got 17 guys. You're stacking linemen. You're hoarding linemen over there. Like, what are you doing with Ryan Bates right now?" And I'm not saying that they're just going to pull the trigger because they have this guy that they took in the second round pick who fell to the Bills, should have been gone long before the Bills picked, but he looks to be the part. And I feel like we need to put him out there, like put him in the fire and see what happens. Yes, I know everyone wants to talk about a window and do we want to, we have Bates and he's got experience, but we're trying to improve what Josh went through last year with Josh's injury. Josh was hit from the right side. We have to compensate for Spencer Brown. What should we do? But if you can get something, because I can tell you right now, if someone calls for Ryan Bates and Bean pulls the trigger, he's got 10 picks already in the draft next year. That'll make 11. He's not going to keep all those picks. He's hoarding those for a reason. He wants to be completely mobile in the draft. He wants to have the most mobility to move whenever he wants to go get whatever he wants. Or he's going to use those during the season at the trade deadline to dangle a carrot in front of somebody and say, "Hey, I need this," or "I need that," or "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" So just something to put out there. But let's talk about Spencer Brown, because I spoke to Lance is an offensive and defensive line guy. He likes to focus on the linemen, the trenches. That's kind of his repertoire. I'm concerned about Spencer Brown because from what I've seen, he looks the same as last year. He looks like his feet are just stuck in these concrete blocks, and he's just slow and stagnant. And that's the side that Josh got hit on that injured his elbow last year. And it wasn't even close. If you go back and watch that film, the guy blew past, I forget who the Jets defender was, blew past
Bryce Huff.
Yeah, blew past Spencer Brown before he even had a chance to figure out what was going on. Now, you said earlier, and I'll allude to this, that we want to give these guys the opportunity to grow, right? It's not the college game, it's NFL. The game is a lot faster. The edge defenders and the defensive linemen are a lot bigger, a lot stronger. They've developed their craft, their moves against opposing offensive linemen. So what do you think happens with Spencer Brown? Again, I say there's 17 guys on this roster that play on the offensive line. They're not all right tackles, but we have a few of them. So what are we doing with Spencer Brown? Is this another wait and see? We make it 6 games into the season and we're like, all right, well, shit, we traded Ryan Bates, who could play all 5 spots. So now next man up. Or we keep him out there all season just to see if he progresses into what we thought he was going to be when we drafted him. What's your thoughts?
Spencer Brown, He's playing a position, in my opinion, that's premium. I know it's not left tackle and Josh is right-handed quarterback, but in my opinion, it's a very important position. And we want to protect our franchise quarterback. We want to give our franchise quarterback time to make plays. We want our franchise quarterback to be aware if trouble is around him. And there were instances last year where the defender got by Spencer Brown so quickly the our quarterback couldn't even feel the trouble come until it came, right? So um uh, Spencer Brown I think is going to be on a leash. There's a reason why the Buffalo Bills re-signed David Questenberry. There's a reason why the Buffalo Bills signed a guy like Brandon Shell who has starting experience. So
Exactly.
if he is not taking the next step, we know he came from a small school. Can't compare. I would like to compare him to Andrew Thomas because of the same position, but Thomas came from a dominant D1 program with the Georgia Bulldogs, and Spencer Brown coming from this small school in I forget the school that he come from, excuse me, but we want to see progression from him, and we don't. Then we have veteran players that's going to step in and try to hold down the fort until we could address it later on in the season or in the off season.
I believe it was Northern Iowa.
Northern Iowa,
Where
yes.
he went. So we
Yep.
got Brandon Shell. We got a guy who's got a ton of starting experience. I'm not saying that makes him just the key factor to replace Spencer Brown, but what happens tomorrow in practice?
Full pads, baby.
Full
Full
pads.
go.
So
Mhm.
maybe the Bills are waiting to see what happens when there's a lot more contact. These guys are in pads, like you said earlier.
Mhm.
Things seem to be different when it's the speed picks up a little bit. The guys are a little bit. I mean, these guys wait for pads. These guys absolutely wait for pads because they love the contact, and it feels more real. Like it's actually all right. We're getting to the point where we're going to be playing games soon.
Mhm.
So intensity should pick up. So we'll see if it's another day of, you know, he's just not the, it seems like he's just not the guy. And it looks on tape like he's doing the same things and has the same mannerisms that he had last year. I think they need to take a look at what they have on the roster. You've got this plethora of
Veteran.
guys to put out there, see what works.
Mhm.
It's tomorrow's July 30th. We have a few weeks until there's preseason. So
Mhm.
let's swap them out and see what happens. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's talk about wide receivers.
Yes.
Because I think that I don't want to say it's an embarrassment of riches, but I feel like we are in a good spot. I felt that way last year too. It felt like we were in a good spot in training camp, and then some injuries happened. Right, we had to
Mhm.
rely on Jake Kumaro playing
Mhm.
against the Titans, and then Jameson Crowder was gone, and then it was like, okay, we have Diggs and Davis, and then we're signing Cole Beasley off the street and John Brown off the street towards in crunch time down the
Mhm.
stretch, right?
Mhm.
So after Diggs and Davis, what are we looking at? The Bills signed a slew of receivers, including Andy Isabella just recently, and they also brought in they drafted Dalton Kincaid and they drafted Justin Shorter in the 5th round. So
Mhm.
what are we looking at? What have you heard? What do you think is going to be the the avenue for success? And then I'll wrap it up by saying, how many receivers do you think they keep on the 53? I know it's early, and we usually do that
Mhm.
more towards,
Yeah, we'll do it again. We could do it again, but for now, okay. As far as our receivers, I think we have some talented guys beyond Stefon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. I believe we're in a good spot as well. Drafting a guy like Kincaid gives us a lot of flexibility. We can now line up in 12 personnel. We can line him up in at the slot, and he can be our big slot guy. So with him, he adds multiple dimensions to our offense that I think can be beneficial for Josh Allen, giving him a big target, right? It could be beneficial for a guy like Dawson Knox, and beneficial for guys like Stefon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. So I think Dalton Kincaid adds multiple dimensions to the Buffalo Bills offense. Deontay Hardy is a guy real small in stature, 5'6", but with the New Orleans Saints, he showed that he's capable of playing on the inside and outside as well, with his speed, and he has explosiveness. So we spoke about Ken Dorsey and his possibility of being more creative and opening up the playbook. It starts with guys like Deontay Hardy. We want Deontay Hardy to be, and as much as I love Little Dirty, right? We want Deontay Hardy to be a lot more than what Isaiah McKenzie was offensively for the Buffalo Bills. And with his ability to get that yardage to catch the ball from anywhere on the field and score, and to show that deep threat and get downfield and get behind the opposition. I think he adds a dimension to the Buffalo Bills that can be greatly utilized as well. Right. So we have those two guys, and we have a guy like Trent Sherfield who has sneaky speed. A guy like Trent Sherfield can help in the run game. He was rated the best run blocker as receiver last year in the NFL. So I think that adds another element to the Buffalo Bills as well. When we want to run them stretch plays or counter plays or screen plays, we have a receiver that's capable of blocking and winning his assignment and having a successful play. So I really like the different dimensions the Buffalo Bills added to the receiver room. And last but not least, a guy like Justin Shorter, who's 6'5", who's physically imposing, kind of like a DK Metcalf, right? He gives you that DK Metcalf vibe with when his shirt is off and this big physical specimen at receiver. So I like him as well. And Khalil Shakir is a guy that has been working with Eric Moulds throughout the offseason. And I don't think we're talking about him enough. I think he is going to take a major leap in year 2. And as much as I want to give Deontay Hardy the job at slot, I think Khalil Shakir is going to sneak up and shock a lot of guys because he could do a multitude of things on the offense, playing the X, Y, and Z, lining up in the backfield as well. He's a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, I think too, if Shakir makes the roster just because he wins the return duties, because the Bills want to use Hardy in a different way on offense, kind of like you said, the Swiss Army knife replacement for Isaiah McKenzie, which I think the Bills, Brandon Beane, and the coaching staff, I think they value that position of flexibility, not specifically a player, but that position, and they want to find someone to fill that role. And you talk about Trent Sherfield and his blocking ability. I think that's what they wanted from Gabe Davis. They wanted the ability to get downfield, make blocks, control your assignment, get in space and do what you're supposed to do. And what's funny is a lot of the videos coming out from, who's catching these nice passes from Josh Allen, it's Trent Sherfield. And I think he's one of the guys that not a lot of people talked about when the signing happened. It happened right at the same time the Deontay Hardy signing happened. And I think he kind of got lost in the shuffle because you had this guy Hardy, if he's healthy, he's explosive, right? He can do kick returns. He can do punt returns. He could take a jet sweep to the house. He could take a crossing route to the house. So I think it's a good dilemma to have. I'm still a huge advocate for Khalil Shakir. I feel like he was highly underutilized last year. If you look at his depth of target and his catch rate last year, it was the best on the team. His average per reception was best on the team. When Josh Allen was just chucking deep balls, if it was thrown in the direction of Khalil Shakir, he was making contested catches, and he's not the biggest guy. He can run the entire route tree. We know we want him. I personally want him to be the slot guy, but that kind of makes it difficult to see what we're going to do with Dalton Kincaid, which is going to segue me into our last topic of the show, is Dalton Kincaid. What do you think the biggest – how do I phrase this the right way? How are the Bills going to utilize his talents? Can we expect Ken Dorsey to use this man the way that we all hope that he's going to be used? Just line him up in the slot, run 12 personnel, whatever you want, and just get him the ball however you can. Do we have the faith in Ken Dorsey to do that? Or are we just thinking it's going to be a trial and error thing? We're going to kind of go with the flow from week to week. What's your thoughts overall? I mean, we touched on Dalton Kincaid a little bit earlier on, but this guy's seems to be every bit the part that we saw coming out of college. Like, we were sold on elite hands, elite pass catcher, The route running is crisp. He can get you the yak yards, which is why he was compared to Cole Beasley when he was drafted, because you can line him up in the slot. You need a first down, 3rd and 8, throw it to Kincaid, and he's going to get you the first down and then some. So what can we ultimately expect from not just Kincaid, but do you have confidence that Ken Dorsey's going to use him the way that we all hope that he's going to be used, since he was a first-round pick?
Yes, I have the utmost confidence. One is because Stefon Diggs, he's there every day. They asked him a question about Ken Dorsey. He has full confidence in Ken Dorsey. He's in those buildings with Ken Dorsey, and my alpha number 1 wide receiver has the utmost confidence. Me as a fan should feel the same way, and I do, and I really think Ken Dorsey had a plan his first year. I'm gonna go back when they signed Jacob Hollister, and for whatever reason, they did not like what they saw from Jacob Hollister, and they had to do away with it. But when we saw the signing, it did raise a few eyebrows. We had segments where we questioned what is Ken Dorsey trying to do here, and now flip to this year, we have a guy once again that's capable of playing the tight end position and playing this 12 personnel and lining up in the slot as well. I think Ken Dorsey is going to finally put that to fruition, be multiple, and the Bills should have more success from it. Now it's going to be some growing pains because it's something that we never seen before, not something that he's never done before, and it's going to be a good test coming out week 1 against the New York Jets, especially with the outside corners that they have and the things they're able to do on defense. But Ken Dorsey, I have the utmost confidence in him to get the job done, to put Dalton Kincaid in the right spots, to put Deontay Hardy in the slot, use him when necessary, put him in advantageous situations, and understand your opponent from week to week. Right? Okay, this defense is good. They're a little below average with the linebackers and safeties. Okay, we want to be able to attack these spots this week, these linebackers. Who can we get out in space? Okay, let's take advantage of the zone opportunities. Let's get Dalton Kincaid out there. Let's get Deontay Hardy out there to take advantage of their linebackers and take advantage of his speed. So we definitely want to see, as fans, Ken Dorsey able to put our players in spots to be in advantageous situations to win, and I think he'll do so.
I'm going to take it. Excuse me. I'm going to take it one step further. I think this is a Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott / Josh Allen type move, because 2 years ago, Jacob Hollister didn't work out. Last year, OJ Howard didn't work out. They've been trying to get a second tight end, even with 2 different offensive coordinators. Now, this is the 3rd year in the offseason where they've tried to bring in a second tight end that can contribute on offense, not just as a blocker, but as a pass catcher. So it's interesting. And as excited as Beane was to get Kincaid, you can tell that this is something he's been waiting for this team and this offense and this system to have. So just something else to think about in a little bit of a different way. It may not just be Ken Dorsey. It may be that the head coach in the front office wants to run 12 personnel, as crazy as that sounds, but they've been trying to bring in a second tight end when they could have easily drafted a wide receiver in the first round this year. There was plenty of them available. Now, depending on how they valued them at that point, but there was still plenty that were taken after the Bills took Kincaid. If they were looking for a pass catcher, no, they were looking for an actual tight end / pass catcher playmaker. All right, so that's going to do it for our comeback episode of Billsology. Thank you for everyone that stuck around. I see a lot of people stuck around for the entire show. I really, really, really appreciate it. That goes a long way for us. We will be back next week, same time, same place. Akeem, you have any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Man, hey, Akeem Richins, Dave Myers. I was about to call him DM3, but he's relinquished DM3. So Dave Myers, David, Billsology, only on the Bills.
Did you just call me David?
David, yes.
All right, Pops. All right, Pops.
we appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight, man. It's been, to us feels like a long time coming since me and my brother got together to do this. Shout out to my brother Lance Nelson, who's going to be our producer throughout the course of the season. And the chemistry, week one, it wasn't bad. It will get better the more we do this. So we appreciate everybody that stuck with us throughout Billsology, our first episode we've done in months, and it's going to get better. And there's a lot more to come. Same time next week, 9 p.m. And once again, thank you everyone.